The president saying he will reveal his choice 6 days from now on Monday. Let's go to America's Newsroom A-Team. Leslie Marshall is a syndicated radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Shelby Holiday is a Wall Street Journal video reporter. Morgan Ortagus is a former financial intelligence analyst for the Treasury Department and a former State Department press officer. The A-Team is here.
Good morning,
it is Tuesday
guys.
morning. It is a busy morning. You know, you think it's going to be a holiday week. It's going to be a sleepy news week. That is certainly not the case. And it's all about the president's pick for the Supreme Court. And here we are, less than a week away now. Leslie, what are your expectations?
My expectations are that the evangelical wing of the GOP is not going to be perhaps as happy. I mean, I've seen the list, and actually there are a couple of people on there that are more moderate, and I think that would be the stronger choice for the president. Alan Dershowitz wrote a piece for The Hill in which he said that to appoint somebody who's going to go back, and just like Judge Napolitano said, Roe v. Wade is Roe v. Wade. It is the law of the land. It wouldn't be wise to appoint someone that is going to try and overturn that, and actually it wouldn't help the Republican Party. Majority of Republicans, even if they're pro-life, do feel that it is.
But that's right, Democrats, as the judge put, that's Democrats making that the issue here. Where do you see this going, Shelby? This is quite the battle that is setting up.
And it's moving quickly. I mean, President Trump says he wants to have his pick Monday. He's interviewed a few people. He plans to interview a few more. But I think the comments that Susan Collins made were really interesting because she said she doesn't want an activist judge. She's one of the people that Democrats are looking to sort of pick off and vote against someone who would be an activist justice. So I think that was sort of foreshadowing a battle and maybe a signal to President Trump that if you pick someone who is extremely right-wing, she may not vote, and obviously he needs her vote. I think that in the end, based on how the last Supreme Court pick went, President Trump will get his way. I just don't know how smart it is of Democrats to make it a huge issue for the midterms and spend all this money, because if this is a done deal by the midterms, that may not be a factor.
Yeah, Morgan, how does the president thread the needle on this with the candidates that we've heard about?
Yeah, I think bottom line, this is a political winner for President Trump. Even some of his most harshest critics during the Republican primary are thrilled that we have a Republican president who now has a second Supreme Court justice that he's going to nominate. So no matter who it's from this list, which is a very, I think, inside baseball list, what Republicans are looking at, the people who are going to vote in November, who are looking to be motivated by the president, I think are thrilled that he's going to have a second Supreme Court justice. I think you're going to see broad support from the Republican Party, from the senators who are voting on this. And so it's a political winner for him. This is why Republicans came out and voted in November 2016, because of how crucially important this issue is. Not just on Roe v. Wade, by the way. That's just one issue. There's a whole host of issues that are important to the Republican base that this Supreme Court justice can determine.
What would you say to the Democrats who are scared to death? You know, you hear the Democrat calls saying from civil rights to abortion to a variety of areas, voting rights will all be overturned and thrown out with this new court.
Well, this is why elections have consequences, and I know that there is a huge debate about President Barack Obama not getting the vote on his nominee in 2016 during an election year. Putting that aside, this is happening during the middle of the first term of a presidency, and I think that Democrats are right to be concerned, because I do think that this is the whole deal, right? This is why you vote for a Republican or a Democrat, because you care about the makeup of the Supreme Court. So I think that the president is going to be prudent in who he chooses. I think that he's going to have a fantastic nominee that can get through easily between all Republican senators.
That's not stopping Democrats from launching preemptive attacks, and they're using Roe v. Wade. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board put out a piece this morning, The Abortion Scare Campaign, Why Roe v. Wade and Same-Sex Marriage Are Likely to Survive After Kennedy. The first line of it, they write, some things in politics are predictable. A New Jersey tax increase, a no vote by Senator Rand Paul, and an abortion rights scare campaign every time a Republican president makes a Supreme Court nomination. Leslie.
Well, Roe v. Wade is very important to both sides. And Democrats, I think, are right, actually, not to use a scare campaign, but to be scared as who the president chooses, and if it were possible, if we could go backward with regard to that legislation back in 1973, that ruling by the High Court. And the reason is because there are a lot of women that are more moderate Republicans. There are a lot of women in areas and districts that Trump won in the past that are not looking favorable for the president. So I think the Democrats politically are actually right to say, look, what would happen with Roe v. Wade? Look what would happen with gay rights. And I think, quite frankly, it will get more people out there because, hey, I'm a Democrat. We're great at protesting. We've got to get out in the midterms and vote. And I think it will bring a lot more Democrats out to the polls.
Speaking of women, the president's expected to interview a female candidate. for his pick today.
Yeah, there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement, but I think it's wise of him to at least interview her.
And
and not talk about her looks. I mean, by the way, I might say some of the reports coming out of CNN yesterday commenting on some of the women's looks and why they would be chosen was really discouraging for all women who spend a lot of time building their professional credentials. Let's just talk about the women and their credentials and not their looks.
I think all women agree. I think most of us agree on that. I high-five you on that.
Thanks, sister.
What about the growing chorus of Democrats that are calling to abolish ICE? And you're talking about the implications of the SCOTUS pick for the midterm elections. Well, what about this issue, Leslie?
I'm hoping that it doesn't have the split that we had, in the past in our party. We had the Bernie people, we had the Hillary people, because there is a split. There are people that say abolish ICE. There are those of us like myself that say that's not a good idea because it's not really the agency that's the issue. It's the administration and some policies, and that again is changed with voting. And we don't want to split in the party. But that is not the sentiment of every senator. Certainly you have Kamala Harris in my state of California, you have Elizabeth Warren, and you have some others. But then you have Amy Klobuchar, who's saying just what I'm saying, which is no, it's not about ICE. It's about the administration. It is about the policies. And remember that people that even want ICE abolished, they're not saying not to have an immigration policy. They just want a change in the policies. But I don't think that should be the slogan and campaign.
They're not offering up replacements in that argument.
And what about the Democratic point of view, or what the Republicans say is open borders? The Democrats and the president has said that.
We don't have open borders. We don't have open borders. I mean, there are people that have not been able to freely come and go in our Canadian border and Mexican border for years. The difference is that we as Democrats, and I can't speak for all of us, but most of us in the party, we don't want a wall as that border. We want border patrol, which would be more jobs. We want better security, but we want smarter security. We don't feel that the border wall would take care of the problems that we have, because it not only keeps people out, it keeps people in. And as we know, a lot of people in are very violent and dangerous, and we have to address that as well.
Shelby, the president making it clear where he stands on this. He tweeted this out. Many Democrats are deeply concerned about the fact that their leadership wants to denounce and abandon the great men and women of ICE, thereby declaring war on law and order. These people will be voting for Republicans in November and, in many cases, joining the Republican Party.
I just think you have to step back and look at how incredible it is that the news cycle and the focus of the news has shifted dramatically over the past week. The president had a pretty rough week when he had to reverse his policy on the border and reunite families. The news coverage was in favor of Democrats. Democrats felt like they were winning, and then all of a sudden, the tide has turned, and the president is a big reason why. Now it's all about ICE. It's all about open borders. He's moved the argument. He's moved the goalposts. And I do think it's an effective argument, because when he goes right and the left goes very left, he is able to bait them into sort of supporting these policies that he thinks are extreme and can say this is bad for the American people.
And talk about baiting. I mean, he really goes after personally in the tweets, Morgan.
Yes.
For example, Kamala Harris. Let me read this, two of them. Saying, at Kamala Harris, why are you supporting the animals of MS-13? You must not know what ICE really does. Here's a link to help you out. And to Senator Elizabeth Warren, why are you supporting criminals moving weapons, drugs, and victims across our nation's borders? You must not know what ICE really does. Here's a link to help you out. Is that really fair? Claiming that Senator Harris supports the, quote, animals of MS-13. She doesn't support the criminals.
Well, I would hope she doesn't. I mean, I don't think she does either. But I think the point here is not that the president moved away from this discussion on children and the borders. The Democrat Party actually handed this to him as a gift. I mean, when you look at what happened, the statements on abolishing ICE came out of 3 women who are considering running for president, who are sitting U.S. senators. I have calls from friends over the weekend who are Democrats who were incredibly concerned. We're not talking about DACA. We're not talking about separating children from parents at the border. What Democrats think was a winning issue for them on those 2 issues is not being talked about. And when you look at abolishing ICE, the Huffington Post and YouGov just did a poll on this. The majority of Americans, first of all, have not even really understood or heard of this debate. And when you start polling them, the majority of Americans, of course, do not support this. So the stronger argument from a Democrat perspective is the one that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are making for reforming the agency. The problem that I see as a political observer is that the leadership of the Democrat Party understands where they need to go on this, but that's not the discussion that's being had. Instead, what's happening is you're seeing another anti-establishment wave in the Democrat Party where they're standing up to their leadership and saying, no, we want to talk about open borders. We want to talk about abolishing ICE. I think that you are really going to see after November, no matter what happens in the Democrat Party, a huge split from people who still feel like that Hillary Clinton stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. That part of the party is alive and well.
Leslie, you're shaking your head.
Well, I think that part of the party is alive and well, but we also realize that, again, protesting after the fact, as we saw after Donald Trump was nominated, isn't going to help us. And we need and want and desire a change in both chambers of the Congress and certainly in the White House. So I don't agree with you there. In addition, because we know that what works in Brooklyn doesn't work in Brooklyn, Iowa, right? We all like that line. But that is a fact. And I think the Democrats are very, we are aware of what our party needs to do. And I don't think that any more split
I think you're right, Leslie, but that is not where I see the energy of your base. I see a resurrection.
No, I don't agree with you. What I think the president has done here, and although I think it's politically smart, is he's trying to demonize the abolishment of ICE campaign and those chants from the Democrats. Wait, but what he's trying to do is he's trying to deflect from what the issue is in America that both sides were very angry about, which was his policy, his executive order with regard to separating.
We want to move on to our other topics because this is another important.
That's the argument right there. That's the debate right there.
Yeah. Peter Strzok and whether or not we're going to see him publicly testify. It's a big question right now. At first, he was volunteering to do so, right? He's the anti-Trump FBI agent that was exchanging those texts with someone. He was having a relationship inside of the FBI. First, he said he was willing to. He was volunteering to do so. Then he had the closed-door session or interview behind closed doors with members of Congress. Now they want him to publicly testify, and his lawyers sort of putting up a fight, saying, having sharpened their knives behind closed doors, the committee would now like to drag back Special Agent Strzok and have him testify in public, a request that we originally made and the committee denied. What's being asked of Special Agent Strzok is to participate in what anyone can recognize as a trap. Shelby?
It's an interesting argument, and I think all Americans would love to see his testimony be public. I think everyone wants to hear from him. His lawyer's point is that he had a closed-door interview, and pieces of that interview were leaked, pieces that were unfavorable to him. So he feels wronged by the House, Republicans in the House, and now he's walking back his pledge to do this publicly and saying, I don't think this is fair, and why would anyone do this if it's weighed against them, if the tables are, if everything is stacked against them in the first place.
Shouldn't Americans have a right to see him
Yes,
testify?
I think all Americans want to see him.
He's on the public payroll.
But why weren't Americans able to see him, the first time around? And there is a way in which these House committees have been doing interviews behind closed doors, and it goes both ways. Roger Stone has always said he wanted his testimony to be public.
By the way, Strzok's asking for the transcript of last week's interview to be released. We'll see if that happens. Meanwhile, will we see him publicly testify last?
If they release the entire transcript, I think he should, because that's what his attorney is saying now, because otherwise I think it's just overtly...
they're not saying that if you release the transcript, he will for sure publicly testify.
No, he said they would consider that. That's what I read his attorney said this morning.
I think he should testify publicly. I mean, this is the guy that was also involved with the Steele dossier, in charge of the Flynn interview, led the Clinton email probe, led the Russian interference probe, and was dismissed by Mueller for his actions for these text messages. So this is not just a normal FBI agent. This is someone who's at the top of the leadership, and the American people deserve to hear what really happened from someone in such a huge leadership position.
That would be fascinating if indeed that comes to pass.
More from our A-team in just a few minutes.